then I think we will start and welcome everyone to this panel discussion on which transitions are needed to integrate SDGs in higher education. And this topic will be well placed under the general theme of the SDG conference, the role of universities in transformative change. And here we will ask, what are the transformative changes needed within our universities? So we are looking back to ourselves and trying to ask a few questions about ourselves. So the thing that we are looking for here in particular is to see if there is any connection, any similarities and links between the concrete shifts in what we need to do at the university to achieve both better teaching that results in better learning or more learning among students, and the development of skills and knowledge that promote the SDGs in higher education. Of course, several higher educational institutions, including UAB, have tried to improve both measures over the recent years. But perhaps we have to ask ourselves, have we taken the full benefit of the complementarity of the two, both the SDG and the learning and teaching and learning changes? And the plan for today is that we have a very strong group of academics here present that will approach this question from different angles. We will have a presentation from Dr. Terry Balser first, and then we will move around the table here to Hilleji van Lant from the IAU Secretary General, Sehoya Kotner from the SFU, the Center of Excellence in Higher Education, the bioCEED at the University of Bergen, and to Sigrun Eliassen, who is the Vice Dean for Education at the Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences at the University of Bergen, all representing different perspectives on the transitions that are going on and needs to be done within our sector. Also, we have Isabel Thomas from IAU present, who will moderate the discussion with the attendees and the panelists. So we will start by having a presentation from Terry before we move on to a round around the table and then finally enter into more open discussion. So Terry is a former Prost and Vice President of University of Calgary, and also a similar position in Dalhousie University, and has been a Dean of Teaching and Learning and holds a number of honors and rewards, and is a very recognized teacher, and I would say a change agent and a leader within the STEM sector. So I would ask you, Terry, to give us a presentation of your perspectives on these issues first.
Great, thank you very much. I'll just pull up some slides to get us started. I assume you can see this, I hope?
Yep.
Yes, great, thank you. Just want to confirm.
Looks good.
Fantastic. So yes, thank you for the introduction and for the invitation to be part of this session today, because it's a topic that I find very important. It's something I've spent the last 15 to 20 years working on, thinking about this idea, that the question that you gave me of how and why does higher education need to change, and something I've thought quite a lot about. And so very pleased to share some thoughts from my perspective as a former executive leader in universities, and pose questions for us to consider as we go through the rest of the panel. So we'll get started. This is something I think we all realize, right? The context from which we need to think about university change is to recognize that the world today is dramatically changing. There's nothing here that we don't know. And we know the world is changing, it's changing quickly, and it's changing profoundly. And the problems that we're facing are complex problems, sometimes even wicked problems, but by definition, we don't want to worry about those because we can't solve them. So we want to think about the complex adaptive problems that we face And we know that these complex problems require adaptive and creative solutions. They don't just take technical fixes. They need us to really engage the best of what we have as humans. But our universities are set up, as we know, in very distinct silos or disciplines. And this has evolved through hundreds of years of our work into the current universities that we have. So where are we going to find the creativity and the vision that will help us solve these complex adaptive problems? The reality is the current education system that we have was designed out of the early industrial era. It was designed with a model underlying it for a world that doesn't exist anymore. It used to be that we were thinking about how do we produce standardized learners who come out the other side of a higher education process with a particular set of skills or competencies or literacies, pieces of knowledge that they would then continue to use as they advanced in a career across maybe 30 years or longer. And now we know that's just simply not what's actually happening and not the way that careers are working. As the world really has changed, we have not kept up or kept pace with that change. So now we know we have a fourth industrial revolution, not the first, but actually all the way through. And there's arguments about this term, but for the purposes of this talk, it just simply means that we are in this world now full of cyber physical systems, generative AI, all kinds of things that we're not sure where that's going to lead us. And on top of that, all of our human activity and all of our energies and all of the things that we've been doing have certainly led us to the fact that our planetary boundaries are at risk. So, of course, we're bringing this back to the idea of the SDGs and sustainable growth, sustainable development, sustainability. So this is the context where we're sitting right now. And I think this is something we all agree on, we all know. So the question is, what do we do in the face of this, right? How do universities need to change? And that is the really important question. So very simply, we have to be willing to, we have to think about how do we rethink what we do? How do we reinvent ourselves as institutions of higher learning? What does that mean? And many, many people are asking this question around the world right now. The work that we're doing with our executive leadership program, for example, really thinking about what are the universities for? Not just what are we good at, but what are we good for? So how do we do that? This is a question that I ask all the time, but it's not enough to say what we need to do. Oh, easy, we need to change, we need to evolve. Okay, how do we do that? It's not so simple, or maybe it is. One thing I think about a lot is we need to rethink or broaden the mission that we have as a university, as higher education institutions across all of us. So we need to, one distinction I like to make that I think is valuable when we think about our curriculum and our programs and assessing those and looking at our quality is the difference between sustainability education and education for sustainability or education for sustainable development. So sustainability education focus is on programs or credentials that are designed to prepare our learners for work in a field, in a green job, specifically to do work related to sustainability. And that is a different focus, I think you would agree, from education for sustainability for the longer term for the world, which is now we start to think about within a university embedding topics related to sustainability throughout our curriculum. And this is a conversation I've been part of quite a bit in the last couple of years, especially. How do we embed these topics across the curriculum? How do we engage and ensure that all of our citizens, everybody that we turn out, is equipped in some way to contribute to global sustainability? And then something that I've worked quite a bit in the last couple of years as well is really thinking about, well, what does that mean for all citizens? So does that mean that we as universities, as institutions of higher learning, need to move beyond the traditional cohorts and the traditional learners who are in our credential programs and think about our service mission and our public education for all citizens? And this is something that I'm working right now with Dalhousie University to create a micro-credential open to everyone, but aimed specifically at municipal employees, the public sector, and public servants, So these are people who are currently working. They don't want to go back, or they can't go back for another degree. They don't want a full program, but they also don't really have the confidence or the understanding of the terminology and what it means to work with sustainability, or even have a conversation with people in the ministry about the sustainability topics, right? So this is what we're also working on. And I see this as also part of the mission of our post-secondary institutions, our universities. And so I'm quite excited to be launching this program starting this spring. So that's something I think is really important. But second, we also might need to think about broadening our focus as well, not just simply our mission, but really think, and this is, again, I don't think this is news to probably people who would have bothered to tune in today. And certainly I know our panelists will be speaking about it a little bit, but really thinking about moving from simply the literacies associated with sustainability. What are the bodies of knowledge, which is, of course, we've been the gatekeepers of this for a long time as universities, but moving toward thinking about, well, what about agency? Are our learners able to do something with the literacy, with the knowledge they have? And what is our responsibility to developing that? And then also competency. Are they good at it? Are they skilled? Are they effective at taking action? So do they know what to do? Do they know the information? Do they know what to do with it? Do they know how to move things forward? And then are they good at it? Are they skilled? And so when I think about the focus that we've had in the past, and the focus that I think we should have more as we move into the future, it's really thinking about moving from literacy to including agency and competency in our goals for the curriculum that we have. And now there's been a lot of really fantastic work done thinking about broad sustainability competencies. Katja Brunders and Armin Wiek have done some really nice work thinking about a framework for sustainability competencies. So the integrated problem solving, systems thinking, thinking about the future scenarios, futures thinking, interpersonal. And so there's a lot of really nice things here. We don't have time today to go into all the detail, but there's a lot of material out there and some excellent work and other ways of looking at these broad competencies. What I find interesting, and conversations that I've been having, again, thinking about that broader mission of who do we serve and how do we serve them, is the idea of not just these kinds of competencies, which are a bit more academic competencies. I would expect these to be in our curriculum, but we were thinking about, what about the practitioners who are on the ground in their professions doing their work? What other kinds of competencies might they need? So we also thought about, well, maybe these are also sustainability competencies, these socio-emotional competencies, the self-management, the managing the awareness, social awareness, but also managing one's emotions. And we were thinking that it's quite important, actually, that people in the public sector, public servants, don't freeze. Right? So we don't get overwhelmed by climate change anxiety or eco-anxieties, that we're able to take action in the face of crisis or stress or concern. And that, to me, is something I have heard less conversation in the context of sustainability and competencies. But I personally would love for my learners to feel confident and agentic, efficacious, they have competence, they have skill, and they have these kind of socio-emotional foundation. So I think these are competencies that are equally worth thinking about. How do we bring these into our curriculum? So the how, of course, we come back to my favorite question: what's it going to take? Not just what do we need to do, but what will it take for us? And I think this is going to be the topic of some of our comments from our panelists, but also, play a little bit with this, right? It's going to take change. We need to think about how we change. And the reality is humans don't like change. Universities are not good at change, but we have to change, and we have to think about how do we change? So what do we need to change? We need to change our teaching and delivery, right? We know that. And again, that's the focus of this session. And we'll hear a little bit more, I'm sure, in a bit. But we need to change our teaching and delivery. And again, moving from this kind of typical model of the faculty member standing at the front of an enormous blackboard. I'm imagining, how does that writing get up there at the top? And that passive delivery outward toward different means and different modes of delivery and how we share learning and how we encourage learning. We also need to change the curriculum that we have, right? The structure and the content. We need to think about, do we need our 4-year, 3-year degrees? Can we unbundle things? Do we need a linear sequential order of topics? Because I think this is particularly relevant when we think about education for sustainability or sustainable development. We can't hold on to the way that we've always done things. Again, I think probably many people here know that, and our panelists may well speak to that. So we need to change these things. And then we need to look, okay, so how do we do that? Another level of how do we do it? And this is from my perspective, again, as having been provost at the universities, as well as a faculty member and engaging with this. We need to think about how we revise our rewards and incentive systems to legitimize the kinds of things we would like to see our faculty members doing. And that might mean revising the criteria for promotion or tenure. And that is quite possible. I've done that at a couple of universities now, so it's not impossible. We need to think about how can we remove barriers to and actively support the kinds of cross, multi, and interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary work that we know is required when we're delivering programs related to sustainability or sustainable development. They don't fit neatly in boxes. I think we're all aware of that. And we can remove those barriers, right? It means actively thinking about who owns the curriculum. Where does it sit? Who administers it? How are we rewarding or recognizing the work that spans those disciplines? We need to be thinking about, at all levels, challenging that linearity of our curriculum and really thinking about how can we embed social relevance and agency and go beyond those literacies. And so all of us need to be thinking about this. We've just had a conversation here in Canada, literally across Canada, thinking about whether or not climate education should be mandated. And if not, what else should be the case? And I think very highly of the idea of mainstreaming the conversation about climate and sustainability rather than mandating it in a specific course that might just get resistance or pushback, but thinking very deeply about how do we do this in terms of our curriculum, and then legitimizing that broader educational mission, actively thinking about how are we supporting learning for everyone in all ways. And so, of course, how do we do that? What will that take? And I think the key thing at heart is a mindset change and a willingness, right? We need imagination for where could we go with this, really going beyond simply how we've always done things. I had a conversation with the mayor of Calgary talking about a climate emergency that she declared for this city and talking about how I could help support education for sustainability. And she said, I don't worry about sustainability first. I worry about imagination and creativity and the ability to see the system. And without that, we can't work towards sustainability. And I thought that was profound, that I was hearing this from the mayor of the city of Calgary. So it's going to take imagination and vision. It's going to take courage, willingness to try new things, willingness on the part of everyone in the post-secondary setting. But also I have authenticity and accountability. And that's something that I have seen, unfortunately, too often. We sign on to a charter, or we make a commitment, or we make a promise as a university, but it's more of a box ticking exercise. It lacks authenticity. And we need to have that authenticity and hold ourselves accountable for the outcomes, and not just simply state that we are going to do important things, but actually document that we've done them and that they've had an impact. So those are the things that I think it's really going to take. And then ultimately, most important of all, I think it takes shared top-down and bottom-up processes and decisions. The faculty members own the curriculum in general. They own their own classes. The academic branch of the university has processes of different types related to academic freedom, related to the governance of the university, but there are decision-making decisions that are owned by that academic branch. And the executive also has its own set of decisions, and there's too often a divide. And so sustainability sometimes falls in this gap where campus sustainability is a more direct line from the executive and academic sustainability sits in the hands of the faculty. We have to be able to work together to broaden our mission and broaden our focus. So that's really important. So just to wrap up really quickly, a very quick example from the University of Florida to hopefully share that it can be done. So we created a project when I started at the University of Florida as the Dean of the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences, and created a project called the Challenge 2050, which was designed to bring student challenge-based learning to the topic of sustaining human well-being beyond 2050. So it was a sustainability certificate. We had as an objective, we wanted to develop and empower leaders at all levels, across sectors and systems. And this was back in roughly 2012. So this is quite a while ago now. And we developed the programming and the curriculum for across sectors. So it was industry, academic, and public sectors. We had multiple parts to it. And I don't have time to go into detail about these, but sufficient to say it was cross-sector, cross-discipline. We organized it around 5 systems related to sustaining human well-being and related to the food system in particular. And then we challenged the students to engage with us in teams and work hands-on with industry, with the academics on a project and a challenge related to food security and sustaining human well-being. So it had a number of different parts. There was a campus-wide course open to all students, all majors across all disciplines. And then the students worked in teams. They worked together. It was very much hands-on learning and working with our industry stakeholders and others. And so the outcome, the last thing, because I love these things that came out of it. The students that in their own voices realized important things, the kinds of things we want for them, I want for them when they go out into the world and are going to engage as citizens. So they recognize, regardless of the role, you can contribute to the solution. No matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, you do have the power to contribute. The students thought the discussions got me thinking. They scared me, but they also made me think about what I can do. So this is that not being paralyzed by anxiety, but actually thinking about agency. How can I help move things forward? Again, they recognize that they could be part of the solution. So when the guest speakers come in and talk about it, oh, I get it. I see where the problem is, and I can help. And finally, something I think is really critical for all of us is that the students were learning that none of us can do it by ourselves, that we need others, and that together we have the potential for the kinds of changes that we need to make the world better. This, to me, speaks more powerfully than anything I could say. It is entirely possible to kind of embed, share, broaden, rethink, reimagine, and have amazing impacts with our students. So in the end, we absolutely can do it. This is a shot from the initial pilot class with that challenge program, which ended up winning an award in the US eventually in 2015. And so we can do it. It's possible. It was because it was top down, it was bottom up, and it was imaginative, and it wasn't hard. It was not intensive. It just meant we tried something and it worked. So with that, I will end and thank you very much, and happy to hear from you separately. My email is there. I invite you to reach out if you feel so inclined. But otherwise, thank you. And I will stop sharing. So.
Thank you, Terry. That was a lot to digest and discuss here. So hopefully we will spend the next hours talking around the things that you brought on the table here. Yeah. Okay, but let's just move on and then I'll turn to you, Hilary, because you are Secretary General of the IAU, and you're working every day to make universities change, the direction of change is towards education for the sustainable development goals. That's one of the things that you often point to, and we heard now Terry talk about how hard it is to change universities, and I think most of us that know the sector, how hard it is to lead universities, and to sort of have an influence on how they their direction should be. So could you give your impressions on how if universities are changing, if there is anything happening in the sector, and if you have any specific comments on Terry's notes here, and what kind of change should we see in the sector? We don't hear you. You are muted, Helgi. We still don't hear you.
I think you might have the, sorry, Hillary, you might have the problem with your headphones and we don't hear you.
Yeah. So okay, I think that's a good idea. Maybe we should just move. Let's hold back on you, Hilji, and move on to Sehoya. And I'll sort of ask the same question to you then. And but you come from a very different place. You're a researcher on education and teaching and learning, and you talk a lot about scientific teaching. And are you ready?
Does it? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Ah.
Okay, then we'll.
So I don't
we'll
stress out
proceed with you.
everyone. There is something with the system that changed, and apologies for that. So you see, we need to be trained into uncertainty here to start with. I wanted to start by saying this is a very timely session, very important to think about thinking and to think about how to change the way in which we orchestrate the way students can think and help think the world in which they live. I would like to thank you, Terry, for a very inspiring presentation, opening points for what will come, I'm sure, a very good discussion. It's funny because I have many points that are common to yours. I didn't look at your presentation before, but I think there are many that will actually come back to a bit of the same, but worded probably slightly differently. So where do I speak from? Yes, I speak from a different position. I am the Secretary General of the International Association of Universities. What does that mean? I sit outside of the university and yet inside of the system, and the systems with an S, connecting with many different university systems around the world and trying to connect them between them in order to instill a desire actually to learn from each other and ultimately to find a better way to deliver on the promise of higher education. And so what does that mean? The higher education has for centuries had the enormous capacity to offer grounds for people to learn, to educate themselves, to be part of a transformative system. And yet we see that we are in a world, your first slides, in a world that is actually not at all in a good or safe place. And so what has happened? Why has the promise of higher education not helped educate people in the way that they have become these informed citizens that can make the difference that they should to the world in which we live? What I believe is like you, that we need a different approach to teaching and learning, to education, to also the way in which we carry out research, the way in which we use the research that is being developed in universities and how it is translated to society, build these better bridges between back and forth universities and societies to universities, to help define the kind of academia world where people will find their feet to become these agents of change. They will, so that they're educated in a kind of understanding of the complexity of the world in which we live, understanding in the true sense of the word, daring to actually go to this uncertainty that it calls for, because you will then, if you accept the complexity of things and the uncertainty of the world, you will have to accept that it is not through one discipline that you will be able to address any of the challenges that we face, but we need to work in teams. So the word teams was very strong in your presentation, I saw, and it is at the top of what I wanted to say here as well. I think team is very important. Interdisciplinarity is very key to the transformations that we need. Also transdisciplinarity. And I was struck by your slide just earlier, where you have those 4 silos. And the 4 silos are math, economics, physics, and chemistry. And what I missed was humanities, the arts and the humanities. Where are they? I think that we will be able to transform if everywhere within the system we instill this dynamics of transdisciplinarity and we connect the difference, math, economics, physics, chemistry, through the arts, through the humanities, through bringing back into the system something that is much more human than it is for the time being. So what I believe is that the higher education system needs to change and offer an opportunity to understand the complex world, probably through the lens of the UN Agenda 2030. That's one of the best things that we have now. If we think deconstruction of the complexity, we have 17 different sustainable development goals. I don't even go into the nitty-gritty of the sustainable development goals, but they all come with complementarity. It is from alleviating poverty, it is health issues, it is the life on land, life below water, it is sustainable cities, it is better work. All of that is part and parcel of a huge puzzle that a student of whichever age coming into a university needs to kind of understand where she stands in order to make the connection to all those and make their own way through the higher education system and move themselves towards the change they need to go through in order to become these critically informed citizens to make the difference for the future. So promote understanding of the global agenda, how to connect the different disciplines among themselves. The students will come in one discipline and it's a tough choice. We see them for 2 years before they exit school and enter university. They have to make these changes in their passes in order to actually select where they will study. And they're all pushed into one direction. They have no choice as to make that tough choice to choose one discipline, and they're pushed into one track. And they hardly ever have the opportunity to go into liberal arts education, for instance, and have this broad first 3 years in which they could explore the breadth of all the different disciplines out there and work across the knowledge boundaries and build their own knowledge system on that basis, actually. So they need to be provided with the opportunity to connect the disciplines themselves, to understand where they vary, how the different disciplines allow to look at one of the dimensions of the complexity using lenses from different disciplines. It's fantastic to put on glasses from history, then glasses from mathematics, then glasses from physics, then glasses from geography or history, whatever, and to look at a same issue from these different perspectives as a student and explore and find your way through this enormous opportunity that is given to you when you enter a university. But we've gone into a revolution, which is an economic revolution of higher education. Everything has to be efficacy, efficiency, and economy. And we don't have time. We don't have time to go anywhere. We don't have time to slow down, actually, and to rethink where we go. We don't have the opportunity to change course even as a student. You enter somewhere and you have 3 years, you have to have your bachelor's, and then maybe you enter and you go into a master's. And again, it is kind of a tunnel perspective of where to go. And when I read a book recently published and about to be launched by Stephen Sterling, he calls for slow knowledge. He calls us to actually slow down and think again in the way in which we will be able to offer this problem-based opportunity for learning for the many, and work with the students and with the staff to actually develop the kind of new curriculum that we would need in order to be able to access the world in a different way. So I agree that we need to avoid this anxiety world in which we push many of the young people today, which actually is indeed freezing their capacity to act. And on the contrary, to help them develop the kind of capacity to be these agents of change. Those who will have an understanding that goes way beyond one part of their brain, but actually connects the heart and the brain and their ability to think and connect the world in a different way. In order for them to become these people who will have the willingness to engage and act, who will actually be able to generate or to understand the respect of the world in which we live, and to learn to care, to change. So I think this whole issue is one of consciousness, one of change, one of calling for more humility when it comes to everything that we do. It calls also for bringing back into the whole system more humor, conviviality, more opportunities, more fun. In order to actually move away from the stress that we see everywhere. Again, this revolution at the university where everything needs to be the 3 E's, efficacy, efficiency, economy, and the rest can die. So we have to move towards STEAM, education, science, technology, education, arts, and mathematics. We have to combine all of that in order to deliver on your 5 points. Better teaching, move away from passive teaching to active teaching, and engaged teaching and co-creation of teaching. I think I fully agree that we need to go to a co-construction of the curriculum, structure and content together where we need to go. We need to revise the reward systems, definitely, because all the reward systems are going towards competition and certainly not towards a cooperation. We need to remove the barriers to transdisciplinarity, because we've been talking about that for now 40 years and it is not happening. So we're not transforming the system and making it more flexible and adaptive to that opportunity. And we definitely have to move away from linearity and move around in circles. I think all these opportunities will allow this transformation to happen and to really help the learners of all ages, and you've pointed that out very clearly as well, in order for them to be able to climb the ladder of knowledge in order to achieve this higher learning that can provide for a more macro understanding of the interconnected knowledge and understanding spheres, and really become these actors for true change. So I would like to stop here and leave you maybe with a few words that I think connect with what you just also said. I think we need to emphasize the importance of the relational aspects to things, the participatory side of things. That's very important. I think there's another word that I found in this book that I just read by Stephen Sterling, this responsibility of people, not the responsibility, but also being able to respond to the things and the world in which we live, of education systems that are much more reactive to the challenges that we face and offer the opportunity really to engage. So I think I've been running myself in 2 circles, and I hope I was a bit clear and that this just will help fuel the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. It's good to be we have someone from the humanities here among all these natural scientists. So you definitely bring on important perspectives on education, which often I think maybe is something that we particularly at the natural sciences forget often. Okay, but Hoya, let's move to you because you are, as I mentioned, a proponent of scientific teaching. You like numbers and statistics, and you do that to try and understand what goes on in classrooms and what goes on within the heads of teachers and everything. And looking from your perspective as a leader of a center of excellence, and which has a lot of well, you're looking at what goes on at the basic arenas of teaching and learning. Is there a change going on, or are we standing still, as we heard earlier?
Well, I don't know if, I mean, there's definitely a lot of change going on. I think that's great. And, but I'm also somebody who's working from this position of facilitating change with people who want to change, right? And so I think there's probably an extent, you know, like when we're talking about, you know, for instance, what universities need to do, right? When that's come up, what do we need to do? And Hilji was talking about that, and I think that there's a fundamental premise there that is that this is a priority for universities. And I don't know that that is a blanket assumption that we can make, right? It would be great if it was, you know, but, you know, I mean, that's the first thing we have to do, right, is be able to get to the point where our institutions are prioritizing this type of teaching. And whether you're being as specific as education for sustainable development, or you're just talking about evidence-based, research-based teaching. But I think that's the first step. And if we can get there, then that's where, you know, somebody like me, who likes to work with my colleagues in higher ed to improve, you know, teaching and learning, then I can work with that. Like once it's a priority, and once it's established as a priority, then there are things that we definitely can do to enact more of this change beyond just our little bubbles. And I think, you know, Terry said it, and I think maybe Hilji said it as well, is, I mean, I think the first obvious step is we need to prioritize teaching and communicate that that's a priority, and not just communicating it by saying it's important, because people are not stupid, right? And they will figure out if we're just paying lip service to teaching being important. And so we can build it into our incentive structures where we incentivize teachers to invest in these things. And then another thing, and this is where I'm going to come in as the kind of the scientific teaching angle, is that we really do need to disrupt that teaching research divide, or at least that seems like it would help a lot. You know, people have their research personas and their teaching personas, and when you can get people to realize that they can merge those identities, they can look at teaching like they would look at their research, and then it will become a bigger priority. And I've seen that happen with dozens, if not hundreds, of my colleagues in STEM fields. You know, once they realize that there's this whole, like, you know, language we use, and a you know, group of people that want to talk to them about this, and a literature that they can read and maybe contribute to, then I think that they're far more on board with, you know, thinking in terms of evidence-based teaching and student-centered teaching. There's two other things I think you.
Yeah, if I just follow up on that, because we just had a discussion around exactly that because I'm definitely one of those that has made that transition from being a traditional teacher to sort of coming through to seeing that we have to change and realizing that and making the change. And I think many others of my colleague has done that, and much of that has happened because of that center that you're leading, Sahoya, and all the inspiring work that comes from there. And I'm certain. I mean, I can just be a walking example of how important that kind of evidence that you point to, that there is a literature. You just realizing there is a literature, just realizing you can use the same approach to your teaching as you do to your research. You can actually study how to do it and learn how to do it using the scientific literature. It makes a big difference. So I just wanted to be to confirm your ideas there.
I'm the same, and I'm guessing several of us here right now are the same too. You know, once that clicks into place and we can merge these two parts of our identity, I mean, it's just psychology, right? We don't want to be conflicted internally. I think the other things that universities can do is to, and this is something I think Hilaji spoke to really well, is this incentivizing. You talked about transdisciplinarity. I'm not even going that far, just interdisciplinarity, right? Being able to teach courses with our colleagues, you know, in other disciplines to the benefit of our students. And I know the system is hard with, you know, the way points are accounted for and, you know, credits or however it works in whichever, you know, domain you are. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. But if we could get to that point where it not only was possible, but it was incentivized, I think that would be huge. And then a really easy thing that I think that we could do while we're on this line of, you know, getting people engaged in just evidence-based teaching, just simply, right, is we can facilitate low stakes instructor-student interactions. That's the easiest one. Because if we can do that, if we can have instructors and students interacting in a non-threatening, maybe even barely academic context, then instructors are going to learn the important message that students are people too, with thoughts and feelings, right? And I think that will lead them to want to be more student-centered. The students will see the instructor side of things, and that can lead to some of these students as partners things that Hilaji alluded to. And I mean, you mentioned even co-creation. I wouldn't go that far in a curriculum, you know, I think co-creation is awesome, but I get a little nervous about co-creating a curriculum because I feel like I'm paid to know a little bit more than the students about what they need. And I think that my 20-year-old self would not have designed a curriculum that would have gotten me to where I am today, where I'm very happy. So I think those kind of things and what that really is a change in culture. You know, it's a change. I mean, obviously there's institutional barriers like how we track credits for multidisciplinarity, but there's also that change in culture and what we incentivize and what it's okay for us to talk about and do.
So Hilaji wants to comment on that, if I might interrupt you. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
No, thank you. I think this is a rich conversation. Just to get back to that notion of co-creation of the curriculum, I do agree that I would not ask students to help me create. My background is professor in comparative literature, so totally different field again. But I would not have asked my students to define what we should learn in that class. But what I would love to see more is student engagement in boards and definition of how to actually orchestrate your own learning, and to offer more flexibility when it comes to this connection between disciplines that we as professors do not always see as the right connection. So if you do mathematics, it's good to do physics, it's good to do. If you do literature, you need to do Latin, you need to do comparative literature, you need to know all the languages, but why not also learn mathematics and physics? Why not also do geography or geology? Because when you go to another discipline, you have to reflect on your own mechanisms that lead to the way in which you learn a discipline. So it's in this confrontation of disciplinary perspectives on things that we improve ourselves, even as professors. I've done that many times in Canada, where I was a professor at Laval University in Groningen in the Netherlands, in Avignon in France, where we've created these totally crazy interdisciplinary programs for students. And it was unbelievable what came out of it in terms of creativity. And it was not the whole system. It was not the whole period. It was not the whole bachelor. It was not the whole master's. But it was this one-time opportunity to actually really think out of the box and flip the way in which the students had the opportunity to engage with la matière, with the knowledge itself. And I think that is very, very, very nice to do. And that's where I see co-creation, where they can say, hey, you put barriers around my education, but actually you do not allow me to explore to the full what my capacities would be. And so that they would have a say in this opening up of the system and cracking up of these rigid way in which we do have these barriers between, as you said so clearly, between teaching and research, where we do have these reward systems that push us in directions that we should not. And then from where I sit, I see the skills discourse enter the university full speed everywhere. And so everybody needs to be skilled. So that's the other way around. We should go far too much towards only skilled and educated in order to become equipped with the skills we need for a job. And we forget the other part. So I think that we're really like a Foucault's pendulum. We moved from knowledge, that blackboard that you had on one of your screens, Terry, where you had this top down and the professor and teaching. Now you only go to skills. So everybody has to do 20 internships, and you have to work in a business, and you have a job when you get out of the university. That's to be the other side of, or the other swing of the Foucault's pendulum. We need to find this balance between skills, attitudes, etc., etc. And so, Hoya, you also work with the Council of Europe. But in that context on these things, I've worked with the Council of Europe on these whole system approaches to the transformation of education. And it's been fascinating to bring all these different disciplines together to think about what makes the difference. How can we change the way in which we teach in order for the education experience to be one that will support and capacitate and empower the students to really acquire the knowledge that they need in disciplines, interdisciplinary, and become actors when they enter the university. Oh, too long. I stop there.
Yeah, so thank you, but we need to get through all the list of participants here, and so Hoya, I know you also have some thoughts about the links here, because between these transformations that we are in, and between the SDG part and teaching and learning part, could you how are they linked? Do you see any links here?
I mean, I definitely do when it comes to this idea of evidence-based teaching or scientific teaching or something like that, because, you know, I work from this kind of paradigm of scientific teaching, and this doesn't mean it has to be science. It just means we approach teaching scientifically. And that has these three core tenets, which are active learning, which are, and also inclusive teaching, and, you know, kind of this evidence-based authentic assessment. And those seem to align really well when you think about education for sustainability, because in my understanding, what that does is emphasize, you know, education that's empowering, education that's holistic, and education that is equitable, right? Where we encourage multiple players to come to the table to discuss capacious problems, right? And so I think we can learn a lot about how we can do at least classroom level teaching. If we just like maybe say lift that scientific teaching paradigm and apply it to education for sustainable development, right? I mean, at least that gives us a toolbox that we can use when we're working with our colleagues. And we also have a rich evidentiary basis that we can use, you know, and I probably know the most about inclusive teaching and kind of how that would align. But I think a really good example is that probably in most of our disciplines, there's a prototypical practitioner, right? And so in science fields, you can, I mean, I could ask, and I have done this in my class, asked 200 people to go to the whiteboard and draw me a scientist. And in a class of 20-year-olds that was being taught by a woman, they all drew men. And this is mind-boggling to me. And that's just one example, right? And so if you see your typical scientist or anybody in your discipline as somebody who has agency, being, you know, white, male, older, from the global north, whatever, then you're not going to see yourself as a participant. And so there's a lot of things we can take from this inclusive teaching literature to increase that sense of agency and relevance. And, you know, the simplest example I can think of is, you know, using scientist spotlight activities. And obviously I'm focused on science, but where as part of the course structure, the course activities, students are introduced to real human beings from a variety of walks of life with all different kinds of perspectives. They grew up in different places. Maybe they grew up impoverished. Maybe they're first generation college. Maybe they're, you know, some member, an active member of some LGBT identity, and that's affecting their science perspectives as well. And when we've done that, we've seen really clear signals from our students that all students, but particularly those that might be marginalized, see the discipline as relevant, they see it as multidimensional, and they see it as personal, and it increases their agency. So there are simple things we can do. I think we tend to immediately go for the really complicated because we want to get there eventually and solve all the problems. But I think there are also easy things that we can do that are informed by evidence and simple, and we'll get our colleagues on board. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Well, it certainly is part of the answer, I am sure.
Yeah, it's a tiny part of the answer. It's a tiny part of the answer, right? They're clearly aligned.
Very
Yeah.
well, thank you. Let's move on to Sigrun. I mean, bring you into the discussion here as well, because you are Dean of Education at the faculty, and you are managing the silos in some sense, and you are you hear all the expectations that exist from high level and colleagues around of both on educational change and on the SDGs. And I know you're also a strong proponent and working hard every day to make changes in the universities, but how, what can you do as in your role to promote the changes that are pointed out here, and which ones are difficult, which ones are impossible, which one are do you disagree with any of them? Is there some that are easy that you see? What is going on at the ground level?
Well, I think that there are a lot of things that have already been said that align very well with goals that we have. I don't know if I'm at the ground level in my position at the moment, but I know about the ground level and what how it is to work in the classroom. So I think that a lot of that have been mentioned, both regarding education for sustainable development and evidence-based teaching, align a lot with what is sort of slowly happening also in transitioning in the way we teach, like student active learning, working with teams, working collaboratively among teachers, focusing on problems and inquiry-based teaching. So a lot of this is happening, and I think, like, on the content side, we have been concerned with issues that are highly relevant, and a lot of these problems and challenges has come from the sciences, like I mean the biodiversity crisis and the climate change. I mean that goes back hundreds of years, and so from the content side, that has been part of our curriculum, I think, for many years. But what is the main transition now, I think, is in the way we teach. The focus on student learning, the focus on interaction, collaboration, and kind of alignment across the programs in the skills training, and the way we think, like, critically, and to teach the students to think critically. And we have been discussing a little bit about how to foster cross-disciplinarity, how to make students able to move across the different faculties and different silos or different disciplines. And I think that is a challenge, like clearly. But I also think it's quite important to think that to be able to enter discussion, to be able to think critically, analyze, use the methods, you often have to know a discipline, be like confident in one discipline, and that might be a good starting point for the discussion in the team. Like if you have teams that are diverse and work across different scientific or general disciplines in the universities, that kind of understanding of your field and the competence to talk across different fields, I think, is also very important. And I think, I mean, things are happening there, maybe too slowly, but in a way to make, I mean, universities are slow to change, but I think we need to encourage this evidence-based approach, like Sehoya has been arguing for, fostering this development of collegiality, thinking as a scientist when it comes to your teaching, and pairing the incentives, as also Terry was talking about, incentives from the grassroots, this bottom-up processes, with the formal educational leadership. And that has to be sort of developing these common goals, understanding about where we want to go and what we want to achieve, and also like a common language to discuss this. And last, also this taking students seriously and making them partners in our educational development. And I think that could be very practical and close, like even this discussion in the classrooms, like entering, being curious about their perspectives, where they come from, how make their questions part of your teaching, but also more specifically having their input also in the design of the curriculum and what we teach more generally. So I think there are many commonalities with the approaches that we heard here, and it's called changing culture in some way, and you need some sort of patience for this to happen. And I don't think it can be either a top-down or a bottom-up process, but it needs to find some kind of common ground there. So yeah, at least that's for yeah.
Yeah, well, I just also, I think I from our, because I know our faculty and I know the places you come from and where we have seen a lot of change. So I'm not sure how much this is an island of change and to what degree that actually is happening across the sector and globally. What we have seen here and what you have certainly been a central part of over the years. So but I think that is I mean, perhaps we it's difficult to see change happening in a 5-year perspective. Then it doesn't feel like change. But I think if certainly if I look back to my like 30 years back when I started, I mean, and if we really looked at what has happened, it's a massive change. And I think also if you think about technology, just what happened during the pandemics and everything, I mean, it's really a fast changing organization we are part of. So I will return to you, Terry. I mean, challenge you a little bit on that. I mean, I think we are a bit self-critical sometimes. Maybe I don't know what you think, Sigrun, but yeah, if you want to comment on that.
Just a comment. I think also that we must understand that some of the new ways of teaching, like entering into these open questions, problem-solving discussions with students, that require quite dramatic shift in the traditional roles that teachers and students have had for a long time, and that is uncomfortable both from the student side and the teacher side, I think. And we need to, in that discussion, we learn about diversity, we learn about sort of other aspects of the people that are involved here, like Terry was talking about, and the competence and how to work with others more closely. But we shouldn't underscore that this is, we need to train this, we need to discuss this, and we need to be open about entering this more unsafe way of and challenge the roles that we have in teaching and learning. So yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone been in a classroom and trying to do things that students are not used to, or actually are not don't expect to happen, knows the uncomfortable atmosphere that can develop if you don't know what you're doing, at least. So that's certainly a challenge as well here. Okay, so then I'll return to you, Terry, and ask you to try and summarize a little bit of all the comments you've got, and particularly perhaps, I mean, do you really think universities are lagging behind society, or?
Well, I do think that the mindset at a university does tend to be backward facing too often rather than forward facing, as it were. So, but it's not so much lagging behind as a bit out of alignment with the pace of change. And back when I was starting out in biology education work, life science education, Jim Collins, who was the director of the NSF, National Science Foundation in the US Biology Directorate, he often said that the biology that we teach no longer resembles the biology that we do. And so that's, to me, is an example more broadly, not just biology, because I take Hilja's point completely about humanities being essential and critical, but that we have a growing gap between the pace of change, the exponential nature of change, and the pace at which universities change, and they're not the same. So that's all. I just think some of the points made here are so key, so important. I keep coming back to the idea of how do we support our faculty members, our teachers, in trying new things and in making some of those changes and having some of those conversations across the disciplines. And it's something I teach my students to talk about. Professors are people too, and to really think about the pressures that are on us. And we talk about low stakes versus high stakes and supporting our students in their inclusive and ideas around safety and psychological safety and emotional competence in our classroom. But our faculty need to be supported in the same way. There's a tremendous amount of pressure to be the expert that, of course, we develop into as, and it's a harsh profession with peer review is not always very nice. And so I think what it does is it instills in us a sense of always needing to prove that we are the smartest person in the room. And this presents a barrier when, in fact, we need to be talking to other people in the room and not have to prove that we are the smartest. And so I think a lot of the work that I've done with faculty development is to support the faculty in recognizing it's okay to take off the hat of expert and put on the hat of learner or colleague or co-creator, and that you're not going to be criticized for that. So I think that's a piece that's underneath a lot of what drives that resistance for academics, is that fear of, oh my goodness, people are going to see that I don't know. And that feels very hard for them. I also just really love the idea of the kind of allowing the students, as you were saying, allowing the students to explore a bit more and finding ways to not shove them through an individual path where too quickly. I think that's really important. And the idea of having faculty members investigate their own teaching and think about it in the same sense as continuous improvement. I've loved scientific teaching. I was fortunate to get to be at the University of Wisconsin when Joe Handelsman was there and starting to develop some of the concepts. But to me, it's that idea of continuous improvement. So we don't have to use the word science so that we're not offending those who don't identify as scientists, but it's not a criticism. It's just I think the principle is so important, and then just really the heart and the head they're bringing those together. It's just so critical that we're not just educating the brain, but we're trying to bring whole people forward into the world, and that means we need whole people supporting them in moving forward into the world. So I really enjoyed getting to hear what everybody's thoughts were, and so I'm not going to take up any more of the time. I think just my kind of quick spin off of all of it. Just there's work to do, and it's good work, and it matters, and so good to be working with colleagues also thinking that way.
Well, yes. Okay, so I just want to remind the audience here that you can use the question and answer. And do we have a question, Isabel? Is there any?
Yes, so thank you so much for these contributions. There has been a question by Robert, our colleague from Norway as well, from my end. So he was asking about, or it's more, yeah, it's a comment and question. I don't know if you see it in the box. Possibly you want to address that one. So it's about higher education institutions being backwards looking, and how much this goes back to also our epistemological traditions to develop evidence based on investigating what has already happened or what can already be observed. So do you see if these methods create resistance towards solving the problems of tomorrow, or do you see there is some answers we can or we can't find in existing knowledge? So I think this is very much a question for Terry, but maybe also some, yeah, have some others might have reactions to that as well.
Well, I'm not sure I have the only answer here. I suspect that others in the panel have quite eloquent thoughts on this, but I do think it is developed out of, as you're saying, the epistemological traditions to be evidence-based and to look at what has been done. And then I think there's often a incremental movement forward when perhaps what's needed is more imaginative, larger jumps. And that is not often the way that we think about the work that we do. But I would love to hear what some of the panelists have to say about this also.
Sehoya, maybe are you afraid that too much research can be
I think I'm really far from being worried about too much research or too much evidence-based teaching. I mean, I think it would be a luxury to be in that position, because right now what we need still is for people to see that there is evidence-based teaching and that there is a need to do it, and we still need to accrue that evidence. But I get the point here about are we being too retrospective, or are we being constrained? Because I mean, and Terry made this point, you know, we're training students for a world that no longer exists, right? You know, and this is a continuous, you know, for evolutionary biologists, this is perfect, right? We're all perfectly adapted for a world that no longer exists, you know? And so I think the main thing you can train people to do is to be flexible and adaptable, right? And that we can learn about from the literature and through experimentation, et cetera. And so probably my ability to answer this question is constrained by my thinking so small about this and not having the big minds of like the Hilgis and the Terrys in the room, you know.
Sigrun?
Yeah, well, I think that part of like opening your classroom and thinking, you know, like thinking scientifically or evidence-based on what you are doing in the classroom, reading up on the literature, that has made a change in the way that the teachers have been exploring, trying out, being less afraid of, I mean, doing stuff and failing and trying again, and using their classroom as a test, like to test out different things. So in a way, I mean, that introduction, at least, and the environment that I know of, have been more willing to explore after I mean, coming to terms with this moving your research brain and your teacher brain closer together has actually made more innovations, more people less scared of trying. And I think that, so to some degree, it's less backward looking, even though you base your data basically on the history of what's happened. So I would say maybe not.
So the transformation of teaching is on track in some sense. I mean, at least, I mean, I would say that there is a process there. There's a research that tells us fairly clearly what to do. There is a movement going on. We are slow, but still there is a transformation coming, and it's my impression. And I think maybe the SDG part here is more fuzzy to me. I mean, that's perhaps more of the where it's not at all clear exactly what to do. And I mean, what we do at our university is to have, like you mentioned, Terry, there is all these single courses that everyone can take from wherever, and that's a big change, and it's a very simple thing to do, just to have like one course per SDG, for instance, and then we are trying to do these masters which are much more complicated, where somebody from one discipline can try and go and do a master at a different discipline, and that's more challenging and much more difficult. I think that's an area where we don't have that clear direction in the same way as within the teaching transformation. I don't know if that was what you you would comment on that, Hilgi, or if that was
I think that Hoya had her hand up and she wanted to comment something there. No, yeah, also I raised my hand and I put it down again. Robert's question is also coming from his whole, if it's Isabel, is it the Robert we know, the one from the SDGs indeed?
Yes, I believe so.
So
yeah.
he cannot speak, but he's himself also very much into the transformation of teaching, and he's done extraordinary work and research on these dynamics, and so he would have a lot to contribute as well. I take away from this conversation as well something that you all said as well. I think this inability to go to uncertainty at some point of our academic lives as well. Not everybody is able to go there, because if you have to change, you have to fare uncomfortable waters, you have to sail through uncertainty, you have to address issues in a different way. And that's one of the slides that you had, Terry, as well. Nobody likes to change. And so the difficulty of change comes with, you have to reassess what you do and how you do it. And to do that is to accept that not everything was perfect what you did. Of course it was not perfect, but you don't say it. And then you have to change it. And but I think that there is also, and that's also something that you just said, that people are more ready now. That's what you said, Sigrun. People are more ready now in certain parts of the world, because that there we see from where I sit the enormous difference between countries, continents even, or traditions when it comes to teaching or even research, where you have to prove that we're the smartest. I think it was you, Terry, who said that, or yeah, you have to prove that you're, and so if you have to prove that, then you will not prove that you're actually not sure about what you should teach or educate people into, and that's something. Yet, if you look at the modern student in certain parts of the world, again, those who are also ready for that, they appreciate the fact that you don't know everything, but you know a whole lot, and that then together you can find solutions to things of the future as well, not only looking backwards, but also into the future. And that little fragility that comes with the fact that you don't know everything is also good for the students, because they get into a system where I'm not sure they always expect that you know everything. What they expect from the professors is that they know the way into research, they know the way into the knowledge systems, they know to help you navigating the enormous wealth of information that is out there. Look at the revolution that has offered us the opportunity to access so much information that at times you're totally lost in this sea of information. So as a professor, we have also a new mandate to help the students navigate through that. And there you are allowed to be a bit more uncertain, because we are now called to much better connect knowledge systems from around the world, to understand the literature from every continent, to bring it into our classrooms. That's a big challenge as well, and that cannot come with certainty. It's not possible that you know everything, even when you think that the classrooms that we have students coming from all walks of life. Sehoya, you said so, from all different backgrounds, different continents. They come with knowledge systems in their handbags, in their backpacks, that we do not know. So as a professor, we need to open the door to those knowledge systems and allow them to influence the classes and inform and improve the way in which we actually look at those certainties that we were certain we had. So, yeah.
I think we have a couple of more comments from the attendees. Isabel, can you take us through them?
Yes, so I think there's a comment of a publication shared. Also, thank you, Robert. I'm going to put the link in the chat in a minute. There was a question that I think that Terry has already started answering in writing, but maybe I can just repeat it. So Anne-Christine is asking for good examples of specific courses experiencing this like positive development based on co-creating teaching and learning innovation with students. So that's a question. Maybe you can give some examples there, Terry, and then yeah.
Sure. I love getting to work with the students as partners, and the point that I was making in writing was really to think about them as partners in their own learning, because I might have subject matter expertise. I have pedagogical experience and decades of work as a faculty member, as a teacher, but I am not 20 years old right now. And I don't know what that means. And I don't know what works for them or what they're thinking about. So I need them to share that with me so that we can create an environment that's conducive to their learning. And the reason I say that as a starting point is that's how I approach every class that I teach. And so the things that I do that might count as co-creating can be as simple as simply continuously asking the students, is this format working for you? I've done that just this semester already, where I decided that we would have a discussion-based format on Fridays for a Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. And I tried one thing, and then I asked the students, did that work for you? And they were quite happy to tell me, no, we would like to adjust it this way. We would like to see a slightly different balance. So that's a very simple thing. I've also had students co-create half the syllabus with me in an environmental studies, basic general environmental studies class, where we start out the beginning of the semester with an overview of what are we going to do. And then I ask them, what would you like to learn this semester? What have you been hearing about in the news? What concerns you? Where shall we go? And I have the first half of the semester prepared, essentially, like I have an idea for it, but the students help fill in the topics. And they're fairly predictable. So it wasn't like just, I have no idea what we're going to do in the second half. It was never anything truly surprising. And it gave the students such a sense of, again, agency and engagement to know that they were choosing topics. And so that's another example of a way to partner with the students in and have them feel some sense of ownership over the class as well. And it doesn't ever mean just giving up all control of my approach or my syllabus. And so that's one. And then other curricula, whole programs that I've developed, again, with that idea of working with the students as partners and having them share with me the things that I couldn't possibly know.
Well, thank you. I mean, maybe we should. There is only 5 minutes left of our time, so time flies. I think this has been really interesting to see the different places you complement each other very nicely with your backgrounds here, it's a huge topic. So if there's anyone that wants to try and summarize some some key learning points here, I'm also struggling a little bit. As I mentioned, I think the learning transition are certainly from this particular place that I am. You can see the clear direction for the integration of education and sustainability. It's more unclear to me exactly how to produce. Okay, so now 1 minute each. Sehoya, I think first, and then Hilije. But we are muted. You're muted, Sehoya.
Okay, but I'm a lot smarter when I'm muted, right? Now, I think one of the things that emerges consistently is the student agency. You know, everybody has said something about that. You know, students as partners or co-creating or whatever it is, giving them some kind of empowerment and student agency. And one of the places where I think we see that happen, where we see the impact of student empowerment is in transforming how we teach. And my guess is, if you think about it, a lot of our colleagues have come to the table of evidence-based teaching, or whatever you want to call it, due to pressure from students, right? You know, they get this great experience in, for instance, at our institution, in our introductory biology class, and then they want all their classes to be like that. And that works because other people will say, I want to follow that model they're using in Bio 100, or what are they doing? And you know, and so I think, but students won't do that if they don't have agency, right? They won't demand certain things if they don't feel like their voices matter. And so I think just planting those little seeds in conjunction with giving students some autonomy, or letting them know that you want to hear what they want and need, is probably a really nice combination that is an easy path to entry that we can all learn from here. So that was my attempt. I don't know if it was a minute.
A little bit more, maybe. Thank you. Hilije, can you have a 1 minute statement?
No, it should be half a minute. I did talk too much. So I think that two things to me emerge a bit like what you said. So it's things that came back all the time. This need to have this whole system thinking. And what we didn't touch on too much is that also not only do we have siloed disciplines, but we also have many individuals who don't want to work with other individuals. And maybe that's something that also is part of the difficulty of changing education as a whole, because if people don't want to work in teams, then you have a problem. The other point that I would retain from this is that we all seem to say that there's this strong call to repurpose education, to find the real entry point for students to finding purposeful, meaningful, and that will allow them to be the agents of change for the future.
Thank you. Sigrun, you have a 1 minute statement? You're muted, yeah. Okay.
Oh, I don't know. It's been interesting to follow the discussion, and also a bit of this. I think the point with the inclusion, and at least from our perspective in Norway, about like half the population is now, at least the female population, is taking higher education, and more people are coming in and engaging here, and they have different purposes and needs. And I think that also the inclusion and the diversity perspective becomes more and must become more and more important. And to me, and that I think that to some degree aligns with our mission to make the discussion about sustainability a common project. So I don't know, that's not summing up any of it, but I think that the mission and sort of the goal of higher education has also been changing through the last like decades, and it involves a larger part of our population now than it did like say 20 years ago. So it becomes probably even more important what we do in terms of achieving this agency for our students.
Thank you. And then I give you the final word, Terry, to try and summarize in 1 minute this discussion.
Oh goodness, I don't think it's possible to summarize in 1 minute. There's so many amazing points that were raised. To me, what I think I am taking away and I think is really essential is to remember our humanity, right? Not just the humanities, but the fact that we're people, our students are people, we mean well, we try hard, and that's what it's going to be that helps us change the most. So that's my thought, I think, to leave us with.
Well, thank you all. It's been a wonderful discussion. So I thank you for your time, and there's more to be said, like always.
Thanks a lot. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having invited me on board.
And thank to all the attendees.
Yes.